Any of you soccer fans been watching the World Cup? I think one of my favorite parts, I can't watch those games all the way through unless it's the USA. I'll watch it all the way through. But I think some of my favorite parts is hearing some of the teams from the other countries saying their reaction to America. You know, they say they're so surprised, we're so friendly. That one big Norwegian guy goes, "You guys are funny." You know, I just love the positive vibes from all of it. Welcome to Community of Christ Grove City, and those of you on Zoom. Beautiful day today, thank heavens. An 80-year-old grandfather went to his daughter's house for Sunday dinner. When the meal was over, he announced that he was going to take a walk through the neighborhood. "I'll be back in 20 minutes, he said. But 2 hours passed before he finally returned. "Sorry I'm late," he said, "but I stopped to talk to an old friend and he just wouldn't stop listening." Our theme this morning, as Betty has said, is come and listen. Jesus said, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." I promise I won't speak for 2 hours. But like Samuel that we heard about this morning, I hope you never stop listening for God and to God and the plans that he has for you. Come and listen. We all have physical ears, but we can choose to pay attention or let it go in one ear and out the other, kind of like my husband does sometimes. The fate of any spoken word depends upon the hearer. Think about that. The fate of any spoken word depends upon the hearer. Most of you know that I was a fourth grade teacher for 30 years. And during that time, I can't begin to count how many meetings, workshops, professional development days I attended. And I know all of you probably had all those kind of meetings with your jobs also. I'm sorry to say that I could probably count on one hand the subjects of some of those meetings. Not that they were insignificant, it's just that most of them didn't leave a lasting impression on me. I don't remember the exact year that this particular workshop was held, but I'm sure it was within the first 5 years of my career. Now, I started teaching in 1974, so that'll give you an idea of how long ago this workshop took place. I heard an illustration that has lasted with me all this time. The lady that was doing the workshop said, "I want you to imagine this." So this morning, I'm going to ask you to imagine this. Imagine you're driving home from work on 270 during rush hour. It's crowded, but the traffic is zipping along pretty quickly. And in your rearview mirror, you notice this car flying up behind you, weaving in and out, blowing his horn, and just being a crazy person. What would you think? Well, some of the teachers that morning said, "Well, I hope he gets a ticket. I hope he has a fender bender." I was thinking to myself, I wish I had a rubber car and I could run into him and, not hurt me, just wake him up or something. So the lady listened to all of our replies, and then she goes, "Okay, let's continue." The guy zips on around you and goes off the exit, the same exit that you were going off of. And he turns into the parking lot of the same place you were going. Say CVS. You go, "Oh, great. I got to go in here and confront this guy." But you go in, You don't see him, so you walk back to the pharmacy where you were going to go, and there he is. And you see this person really upset, and he's going, please hurry, my daughter is so sick. If I don't get this medicine back, it's literally life and death. What do you think about him now? That illustration has stuck with me all these years. You don't know how many times I have been in a situation or had people say things that I didn't think were cool, and my first reaction is to judge. My second reaction is to think, you don't have a clue what's going on in that person's life. What made them do that? What made them say that? When I began to prepare for this morning's message, I realized there were several ways that I could go. And after much debate with myself, I decided to go with two different interpretations. This is the parable of the sower. In the first example, we are the soil in this story. In the second example, we are the sower. In both examples, the seed is the word or the gospel. Don't forget that. The seed is the word or the gospel. This morning's scripture that I'm using is taken from Matthew chapter 13, 1-9, and 18-23. I'm going to read verses 1-9 now, and 18-23 will be woven later into the message. But before I begin, I want to tell you where the pictures I'm going to use came from. I know you're all used to me putting up my pictures of trees and, wherever I've been hiking. When I go for walks, if I see something, it catches my eye, and I think, ooh, maybe I can use this in a message sometime, and I'll take a picture. Well, when I started working on this morning's message, I happened to think of these two pictures that I'd taken. I didn't know how long ago I'd taken it, so I'm scrolling through my phone. One of the pictures was taken in 2019. The other picture was taken in 2020. Now, the rest of the pictures I took just a couple of weeks ago to add to the message. But don't ask me what I had for supper yesterday. I can't remember, but I remembered those pictures, and I found them. Okay, back to Matthew. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it, while all the people stood on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they were withered because they had no root. Other seeds fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. If you look carefully, you can see the brighter green, the darker green. Those are the soybeans. And those other two pictures, those little greeny things, those were soybeans. But all the other stuff was weeds. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. That is the whole field behind my house. He who has ears, let him hear. In Mark chapter 8, verse 18, Jesus says, therefore consider carefully how you listen. Notice he doesn't say hear, he says listen. Those are two very different things. We can hear with just our ears, but it takes our mind, our concentration, and our thinking to really listen. Jesus taught in parables because it was and is easier to understand when we can see examples that we are familiar with. Jesus says, "Blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. Therefore, hear the parable of the sower." We are going to call the 4 different kinds of soil listeners. You, me, all the people we talk to. Those are the 4 kinds of soil, the listeners. I'll call the first listener the pay no mind listener. In Matthew 13:19, it says, "When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in his heart." That would have been the first picture. This listener doesn't understand because they are on the wrong path. Even if they hear the truth, their attention is on something of this world. So they just pay it no mind and go on their way as usual. Sometimes the lack of understanding is because of language and ideas that are confusing. Here is an example. Hope I can get through it. It's a tongue twister. A worker asked for a pay raise and got this note back from his supervisor. "Because of the fluctuation disposition of your position's productive capacity as juxtaposed to standard norms, it would be momentarily injudicious to advocate your requested increment." The puzzled worker went to the supervisor and said, "Is this about my pay raise? If it is, I don't get it." "That's right," said the supervisor, "you don't get it." Jesus didn't try to impress people with language that was difficult to understand. Well, what would be the point? What's the point of teaching using words that your students don't understand? Jesus was trying to teach us the way to live together peacefully and lovingly. Pay it some mind. The second kind of listener has just a passing interest. Verse 20 to 21 says, "The one who received the seed that fell on rocky places is the man who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since he has no root, he lasts only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, he quickly falls away." These listeners are not rooted in faith. They have an emotional rather than a heart response to the gospel. They take it up and run with it, but drop it just as quickly. They have no staying power. Where their faith would hold them like an anchor in the storms of life, the word never took root in their heart, so they don't endure. The third type of listener is preoccupied. Verse 22 says, "The one who received the seed that fell among the thorns is the man who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke it, making it unfruitful." This kind of listener has good intentions, but so many distractions. The worries and cares of this life and their wealth and opportunities are calling to them louder than Jesus is. The good keeps them from the best things in life. Someday they plan to get involved in this church stuff. Unfortunately for many, someday never comes. The fourth type of listener is perceptive and productive. Matthew 23 says, But the one who received the seed that fell on good soil is the man who hears the word and understands it. He produces a crop yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. This is the kind of listener we want to be. They listen, they understand, and they share what they have heard. Hearing must be translated into doing, or it is like knowing a cure for a disease and not taking the medicine. Hearing must be translated into doing, or it is like knowing the cure for a disease and not taking the medicine. No farmer expects every seed he sows to germinate and produce a crop. But he is assured that if he sows, he will reap a harvest of some size. So now let's shift gears and become the sower. My husband was a farmer all his life until December of 24, so it hasn't been quite 2 years yet since he retired. He pretty much did the same thing every year. Maybe he changed the brand of seed he was planting, maybe the weed control, fertilizer, he rotated fields, and of course everything depended on the weather. Even if the crops were not good, he still continued year after year. I couldn't imagine him saying, well, we had a bad crop, so I'm not going to plant next year. No, he just had faith that things would be better and continued to plant year after year. We have to be like the sower who spreads the seed anywhere and everywhere. Notice that Jesus doesn't tell us that the farmer carefully tilled and plowed the land before diligently placing each seed carefully in the perfectly formed hole. Nope. This farmer is throwing seed all over the place. On the path where people are walking and birds are feeding. On the rocky ground where the soil was shallow. Among the thorns where there was great competition for water and light. Everywhere. Now think about this. A farmer in Jesus' day scattering seed indiscriminately on paths, rocks, and amongst thorns was considered wildly wasteful and inefficient by agriculture standards. But God is the master sower. And this highlights God's radical grace. The gospel is offered to everyone, everywhere, regardless of their current spiritual condition or how unworthy the soil might seem. I want you to look at the first 3 pictures again. The first one was the soil, the path where the birds were eating and people were stomping. Oh, where'd it go? The one in the middle it should be one big picture with all 3 of them together. There you go. There we go. Okay. The one in the middle was the one that was the shallow soil. It popped up fast and then it just shriveled. And of course, this one was among the thorns. But I want you to notice something. Do you notice anything? Even though the soil is not ideal, some of the seeds are still growing. See that little tiny green thing sticking out? I don't know how in the world it got through. Look how hard that soil is. It's thick, it's hard, and that little soil, or that little seed, that little soybean still popped through. We don't know when someone is ready to receive the word. We just have to keep sharing it and living it. This little wooden plaque sits on my china cabinet in the living room. I don't remember where I got it, but whenever I saw it, I remember thinking, I have to have that. Your life may be the only Bible some people read. Think about that. Your life may be the only Bible some people read. We have to live it. Not just say, oh, go read chapter such and such. We have to live it. Are you living the Bible? Are you living what Jesus taught? Are you kind and loving and patient and honest and generous and non-judgmental and inclusive and forgiving? All those things he taught, that's what he called us to be. Is there any place where God's seed cannot take root and sprout? No. God can make anything thrive. As disciples, our job is not to decide what the good soil or good people, who they are before we start planting. Our job is simply to scatter the seed, the word, everywhere, and trust that God can work miracles in any circumstance. Jesus says to come and listen, and then go out and share the word with everyone. Thank you.